You know, a dream is like a river, ever changing as it flows. Hello again, ladies. This is Maxwell Ivy, known around the world as the Blind Blogger, and you can find me at theblindblogger.net, where you can purchase my latest book, The Blind Blogger's New York City Adventures: How You Can Make Your Dreams Come True. And today I'm lucky to have a very special guest with me, partly because of what she does and who she is, but also partly because she's just as crazy as I am, and she's also part of this new thing I'm involved in called the Max Around the World Challenge, which we may talk about today or we may not. But the main thing is I want y'all to hear from her as far as some of the things she has learned about traveling in style and traveling for less. Her name is Anne Slater Brooks. Her website is Travel the Globe for Less. And she is not about traveling cheap. She's about traveling in style, traveling luxuriously, but doing it as economically as possible. Or at least that's what I think she does. I'll let her tell me if I'm right or wrong. And you can find her at Travel the Globe for Less, and instead of the word for, it's the number 4, traveltheglobeforless.com. So thank you for coming on the show, and welcome, man. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. You?
Okay, well, thank you for being here. Did I get anything wrong so far?
No, that's actually really good, and I'm glad that you said that because I have had a few people say to me that I'm a budget blogger, and that's definitely not the case. I was a budget traveller back in the 90s when I was broke and fresh out of university, and now I like to think that I can afford to travel in a little bit more style, but I'm still quite frugal, so I like to save money where I can, so I can travel more, basically.
All right, and why don't you tell people a little bit about your background, what you studied, and if that's actually helpful in your career today, and what you do for a living when you're not traveling.
Okay, so I studied back in the day politics and French. It has nothing to do with what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I work for an investment company raising capital, which we then use to invest in small UK businesses. So I have a very corporate job by day, but my passion in life is travel. So they're two totally separate things. I have recently just finished my MBA, so I obviously do have a strong interest in business, and I do find it really fascinating. But I probably find it more fascinating just to figure out what makes people tick and what makes people successful. And ultimately, any success that I've had in my career is really in order to be able to pay for my holidays.
I see. And what are some of the things that you have found that make people successful?
Oh, God, that's a really good question. Sounds like an interview question, actually. But I think, to be honest, I have this view. I came from a really working class family in the UK. So my parents had nothing when I was a child. I went to the cinema once as a child. I never ate out as a child. I never went to McDonald's. We weren't really poor, but we didn't have a lot of money. So I know what it's like to have nothing, really. And I guess I always thought that because I came from that background, I would always be in that position. But what I realised is education is everything. If you go and get yourself an education, it's not so much that then guarantees you success, but it gives you the belief to think that you can be successful. Because I went to university with a lot of people that were brighter than me, but a lot of people that weren't as bright as me, a lot of people that had a lot more wealth in their life, and people that had a lot less. And what I realised is actually the ones that succeeded weren't the ones that were wealthier, they were the ones that worked harder. But they had a belief that they would succeed regardless of how hard they worked. I think going to university made me believe that I could succeed, and since then it's been pure hard work. Nobody achieves great success without grafting, whether that's blogging or in any kind of job. Too many people think that you can earn 6-figure salaries and work 10 hours a week. It's not possible. Well, unless you're a YouTuber or something ridiculous. But for most mere mortals, that's not possible.
Right. Well, the question, I asked it because you kind of led me into it by describing what it is you gained from your political science education. So,
Oh no,
uh,
don't ask me about Trump.
no, I'm not going to ask you. We avoid him. I actually get into discussions all the time about with people who think I should be more politically active uh, and more out front online, especially considering uh, that he has shown no interest in causes directly affecting the visually impaired. So, and just not calling him out on his BS online. But my philosophy is, for the most part, I'm a business person online, which means my goal is to make money. And if I start doing stuff that's going to bring the attention of the 800-pound gorilla, whether that be Trump or Kardashian or whoever, those just aren't good for business. At least that's my opinion. And
I
so
totally agree with that.
I do not want to get on the wrong side of somebody who has 40 million Twitter followers. That's just not. I don't think that's smart business. I could be wrong. The guy who just wrote that book, Fire and Fury, says he wants to send Trump chocolates for making him famous. But since my subject matter is narrative nonfiction and motivational self-help books, I really, unless Trump's going to let me coach him to be a better, nicer person, I don't know that getting on the wrong side of him helps me any. So, but I know you mentioned that because my degree is also in political science, and I do tend to agree with you. There is value in completing the degree and getting the education that goes along with it, whether it turns out to be directly useful to you in your career or not. With you, though, after you started working, you went and got additional degrees, and so that probably does make some difference as far as what you're actually doing in your career. So when was your first travel experience growing up in this working class background, and when did you know that you were so in love with travel that you wanted to make it part of your career as a blogger?
Oh, so my first travel experience, as in out of country, was when I was 8. So I went abroad once when I was like a minor, and we went to the south of France, and we went on a bus. So it took about 25 hours to get there. My stepchildren would be horrified at this concept now. Like, just getting in the car for 30 minutes horrifies them. But 24 hours, but that's what we did in the 80s. We got buses. I bussed all around Europe. I've travelled a lot since then. So once I became an adult, I went overseas, worked overseas, started travelling a lot more. But I only actually started blogging about 3 years ago. And I just felt there was a gap in the market in the UK for the kind of stuff that I blog about. And I guess also I wanted to do something a bit more creative rather than just pure corporate. I wanted to do something that challenged different skills in myself, and it has definitely challenged me with lots of things. So yeah, that's quite a recent development.
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier because you were commenting on how much stuff goes into being a blogger, and you were wondering how I do it. So what are some of your biggest challenges as a blogger, and then also as somebody who wants to travel in style but frugally?
Well, challenges as a blogger. People have no idea what goes into a blog. They just look at a web page and think, oh, look, lovely web page. What they don't appreciate, and I didn't either until I started blogging, is all the other things. So you have to learn about design, you have to learn about editing, copywriting, sourcing, you have to learn all about SEO, using a WordPress system, about hosting, like trying to convert a blog into income, affiliate stuff. There's like a million different things that you need to learn. And that's even before really you start getting anywhere close to making any form of income off it. So I think with blogging, it is always a constant learning thing. And I definitely had a lot of painful times when I first started with my blog breaking or the hosting breaking and my site going down, and just things that literally would make me despair and think, what the hell am I doing? I still have days like that, to be fair, but they're much, much fewer and further between, because for the most part, I kind of know what I'm doing now.
Well, at some point, it will get to the point where the things you're doing, you've done so often, and they don't change much. So at least there's a certain amount of things where you can get to a comfort level with them. But I understand what you're talking about with all the things that go into blogging, and you didn't even mention email lists, social media, recording videos, or doing photo slideshows. So, and I'm sure there's things I'm not thinking of that I agree with you, just so much more than writing your thoughts down and posting them online, especially if you have any plan in the future of making money off of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a fallacy as well, because people think that people that don't get blogging, like some people that are my friends, will say, well, so you just write about your travels. And it's not really like that, because if all I ever do is write about my travels, frankly, people will be bored. And for the most part, people don't really care about my travels. It's more about what can they learn from the way that I travel that then can help them with their traveling. So I learned the hard way, I think, that if you just blog about your travel and you don't give any value to your readers, you won't have many readers. So it is really about trying to find something that somebody else finds useful to make them want to come back. And that in itself is a massive challenge, because it's like trying to read the minds of 7 billion people.
Yeah. So, what are some of the things that you have learned as far as traveling? What would be like the first thing you would say that anybody who wants to travel more? What is the first thing you would say they need to understand?
That's a really hard question to answer, because there's so many different ways I can answer it. A lot of people say they haven't got the money to travel, and I disagree with that, because it's all relative. I travelled when I was fresh out of university with virtually no money. I travelled when I was an au pair in Belgium when I had virtually no money. But I just travelled differently. So I always got the bus, I always got the cheapest form of transport. I stayed in the cheapest place I could find. I didn't eat out. I'd get like a takeaway or a sandwich from a shop rather than going to a restaurant. I didn't go on tour buses. I would walk around the city with my guidebook. So I think there's always a way that people can travel. It's just they might have to change the way they travel.
I'm glad you made that point. That's a good place to start, that many people don't travel because they think they don't have the money for it. And what are, besides taking the cheapest transportation and finding other ways to enjoy the places you visit, what are some other ways that people can get past this limiting belief on needing money to travel?
I think in reality, if somebody genuinely believes that they need loads of money in the world and they're not prepared to change the way that they travel, they don't want to travel enough. I'm sorry, people make excuses, and money is the most convenient excuse to make. But if that is the excuse that somebody's going to make, my view is they clearly don't want it enough. Because like I say, I had no money when I was traveling as a teenager. I got paid like a pittance from the job that I did. But I would take my pittance and I would literally get on a train and go wherever I could afford to go. Now it's different, because I'm in a position where I can afford to travel more, but I want to travel in a more luxurious standard than realistically I want to pay for. So now I find ways to use airline and hotel rewards to allow me to travel at a better standard, but without paying the higher cost for it.
Right. Right. So now you have started to learn how to use the airline miles and other rewards programs in order to get more for your money. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. And just one other thing I want to pick up on as well, because the other limiting belief that people have with travel, which frustrates me no end, and for you guys in America, this is particularly relevant, is they'll say, I don't have the time to travel. Well, that is nonsense because I work for a company, so I'm employed, which means I have a set number of holidays a year. And admittedly, I get a lot more holiday entitlement than you guys get in the States. So I'll get at least 25 days, where I know it's common in the States to get maybe 10 days. But most of my friends and family think that I'm travelling permanently. And it's just perception. Just perception. All I'm doing is posting pictures on Instagram of places that I were at 4 weeks ago. But it's kind of, it's what they perceive to be reality. The reality is I will go to New York for 3 days. If I've only got 3 days holiday and I desperately want to go to New York, then that's what I will do. I went to New Zealand for a week. And that is a long, long journey. It's actually a really painful journey. I'll do it because I wanted to go there. I go to places in Europe for 2 days. It's whatever it takes to get me to the places that I want to go. I ensure that all my public holidays, I use them to travel. So I don't ever take holiday, like time off work, and spend it in the UK. That's a waste of time. I have to use it to travel.
Right. I recently was interviewed by a lady who lives in Australia, and she told me the flight from the U.S. to Australia is 16 hours, and it's one of those flights that is horrible. It's painful. She said, but us Australians realize that in order to get anywhere, we have no choice but to fly a long distance, whether it's to the U.S. or to Asia. We're going to be on a plane for hours. And she says she thinks that actually is one of the reasons why Australians travel more than most people from the U.S. because they don't have that problem about the idea of being on a plane for hours in order to get where they want to go.
Well, I worked with an Australian girl in my previous company, and she was living in London, and she would go back to Australia once every 3-4 months for 3 days. Now, to be fair, even I probably wouldn't do that. But that's what it takes sometimes. It's how much do you want it?
Right. How much do you value the experience of traveling, or how much is the potential value to you and the people you will meet and the experiences you will have? If worth enough, then you will find a way. And I think I should mention that when I went to New York City last year, I had $420 cash to spend. And later in the year, when I went to Philadelphia and Buffalo, I had $500, but I was going to be gone longer. So, there are ways out there, especially if you are willing to stay with people and not be one of these people who has to stay in a hotel or they don't consider that they're on a trip.
Now that's funny because when I was a teenager and I was traveling, I literally, and this comes back to some of the conversations you and I have had. So I literally I was almost like a stray. So people would just take me to their homes and put me up. So I turned up in Italy for a job that started on the Monday, but I thought I was supposed to be there on the Saturday. I turn up, there's nowhere for me to stay. I just shrug my shoulders and say, well, what are you going to do about it? Sort me out sort of thing. And before you know it, I've been sent to somebody's house. I don't know the family. They can't speak English. I can't speak Italian. And they put me up for 3 days and treated me amazingly well. They took me out. They showed me that we couldn't communicate properly, but we managed. I learned Italian quickly. But it does. I guess it's that. It goes back to, I didn't have a lot of money, but I figured out a way to travel because I would take that hospitality of people that maybe now I would be less comfortable doing because I would feel like I was imposing. Back then, I never even thought about it. I just thought, yay, somebody's giving me a free bed, I'm in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm talking with Anne Slater Brooks of Travel the Globe for Less, myxwalk.com, and that's the number 4 instead of the word 4. And we're talking about traveling and people's beliefs. And I was hoping we would eventually get to some of your stories about the way you have traveled over the years, because a lot of times, in order for people to really get it, they have to hear those personal experiences in order for them to understand the message you're trying to give them. And I love how you keep talking about excuses on the show that's called What's Your Excuse? So thank you very much for helping out that way. So you stayed in Italy for 3 days with a family you hadn't met. Have there been other times when you basically depended on the kindness of strangers, for lack of a better phrase?
Oh yeah, and Italy is one of the best places for it, I have to say, because that was the summer that I graduated from university. So I left Britain with not very much money at all. And I worked for maybe 3 weeks in Italy, so I got a bit of money, but it wasn't a lot. And then at the end of those 3 weeks, I think it's a family member of somebody that I was working with, invited me to go stay with them in a different part of Italy. I went and stayed with them. They put me up for about a week. They dropped me at the train station every day to go to Venice and Verona and all these places that I'd read about. They then drove me up to the lakes in northern Italy and dropped me off to meet friends. And it's kind of things like that. I've never had the opportunity to be able to do that for somebody, almost as a thank you to them, because I never kept in touch with, which I find staggering. But I think, Christ, somebody did that for me, and how generous is that? The thing I had to give them in return was literally a thank you, because I had no money. So I kind of think I'd love to be in a position to be able to do that for somebody now, to give them back that opportunity that I had. And I always, I meet people around the world all the time that I travel, and I always say to them, come and visit, and nobody ever comes. That's not true. Lisa, my Australian friend, did come. She came.
Yeah. Well, most people just think you're being polite. They don't realize that you actually mean it. And I've been lucky that I've stayed in contact with the people that I have stayed with in the few limited travels I've had so far. But I do think it's a lot easier now with social media, because as long as you have somebody's phone number, you can pretty much find them online, and it's in one of the sites that we're in. I don't know if that would be, of course, that assumes they speak English, which is one of those things we do here in the U.S. that they don't do a lot of other places in the world. Y'all don't automatically assume everybody's going to speak English like many people in the U.S. do. So in addition to being taken in, have you learned any other languages? Are you?
Well, I did French as part of my degree, so I speak French. I did teach myself some Italian that summer, to the point I could communicate, but really, really badly. But I forgot a lot of that because it wasn't ingrained learning. But I reckon, I've not tried this, but I reckon I could teach myself Italian relatively quickly, which I think I probably will do at some point because I love the country. I started learning Arabic, which didn't go so well, but it's not as difficult as you might think, as long as you don't try and write it. And I started learning that just because I thought, oh, that's something different. I'll give that a go. And I actually really love the Middle East as well. So it sort of helped just to have a few phrases to not look like quite such a terrible Westerner that just doesn't make an effort at all.
So have you traveled in the Middle East?
Yes, I've traveled around quite a bit in the Middle East. Been to Jordan, Israel, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, which are not that Middle Eastern really. Some people will probably disagree with me on that point. Where else? So I've been to those. I'm sure I've been to some other places, but I just can't think of them off the top of my head. Turkey.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't mention this in the introduction because I knew I'd get it wrong. But you've been to how many countries on how many continents?
I've been to 6 continents. I think I've been to 84 countries, but I'm not sure when I last tallied it up.
Yeah. Says to.
And it does also depend on which you define as countries, because some people define the Vatican as a country, others don't. I count it.
Well, I would say as long as they put a different colored stamp on your passport, it's probably a country.
Well, that's the downside with European travel now, because you don't get stamps.
Oh, you don't? What do they do now?
Well, if you're in the EU and you've got an EU passport, you just don't get a stamp. I mean, you might get a stamp, but I don't get a stamp going to all the different European countries.
I know so little about international travel. I was surprised recently during the discussion about moving our embassy. I was surprised to find out that if you go through Israel, you don't get you don't, as a U.S. person, you don't get a stamp from Israel because for years they were afraid of getting involved in people thinking they were in favor of one side or the other in the disagreement.
Ah, well, that's an interesting one because I have got an Israeli stamp in my previous passport, which I deliberately made them stamp because normally what they do is they stamp a piece of paper that they put in your passport so you can throw it away afterwards. And the reason they do that is if you go to places like Lebanon or Syria, not that you'd really want to go there at the moment, but in your or Jordan or any of these countries, if you have got an Israel stamp in your passport, they won't let you in. So I want to go to Lebanon, but at the moment we're having to wait for my husband's passport to expire because he has got an Israeli stamp in it, and Lebanon definitely will not let you in with an Israeli stamp.
Okay. Well, I think it's one of those things. I have yet to own a passport, so obviously I need to get one. But I wasn't aware that passports expired. Something else I didn't know.
Oh yeah, it will only last you for 10 years, and then you'll have to fork out for another one.
Okay, all right.
But then you see, the challenge once you get it is to fill every one of those damn pages. That's my next challenge to you, Max.
Yeah. How many pages are you talking about, and how personally did you take the challenge?
Well, I don't know how many pages you get in a US passport or a British one, to be fair, but I did fill my last passport. You can then get a thicker passport, which I might fill this one, but sadly the fact that I got a thicker passport means I've not been able to fill it as quickly. So I'm not entirely sure how many stamps and stuff, but a few.
Right.
We're going to have to send you off to India and all those places where you get full page visas, and then we might have a chance of filling your passport.
Yeah, so much more stuff to learn. And that's the way it is. I think, well, you're not the only person who's told me this. Many people have said, once you start doing things, there are going to be people with opportunities are challenging you to do even more things. So we'll see what happens.
Now, Max, I don't know what you're doing in your seat, but you've completely disappeared off the screen by the top of your head.
Huh. I did not do anything, but this is one of the things about a blind fellow doing a video recording. Sometimes you get the top of the head. I mean, but
well, that's what I thought I would tell you, because clearly you can't see that you disappeared.
Yeah. One of my favorite interviews so far, and one that got the most reaction, was one I pretty much anytime I interview somebody who is also blind, we usually get good feedback on those posts, because they're like, it's one thing if Max is blind, but the other person can see. But for both of them to be blind and trying to do something in a video medium, that's impressive. So like I said, we usually get really good responses to those interviews. And I need to write a blog post about my last one with a fellow named Peter Altschul, who's also an author, because people haven't really watched that video yet. But yeah, the video is interesting. I've had fun with it, whether it's my iPhone or my laptop, and I just generally don't worry too much about the video. If I'm in focus, that's like a bonus to me. I'm more interested in did I say something people might remember is what I'm going for. That's my number one goal, and being in focus is like second or third. People will ask me about stuff in the background. I always just if I don't really get as obsessed about what's in the background like other people do. I know there's some podcasters who they they actually spend hours figuring out what they're going to put on that wall behind them.
Oh dear.
And it's usually a blank wall because I feel like if I spend that much time thinking about that kind of stuff, I'm not going to get other things done. So,
Well, just for your benefit, I
I'm
have got a blank wall and I'm sat in my bedroom because, as you know, I got turfed out of my lounge so my husband could watch TV. That's where the
yes,
priorities lie in this house.
right. So, in the U.S., when it comes to American football, women generally fall into two categories. They either are women who don't understand the game and have no interest in it, or do understand the game and still don't want to watch.
Okay, well, I wouldn't even care which camp I fell into. I just hate football. Rubbish.
Yeah, you hate football. Is there a sport you do enjoy watching?
I love all sports. This is the thing. It's just football that I don't like. I can literally watch anything, whether it's darts, skiing, baseball, like swimming, athletics. Athletics is probably my favourite. But like, I'll watch any sport, but football, it's boring.
Are you,
And
are you going to have to kick him out of your lounge when they go to the figure skating and stuff like that at the Olympics next month?
Probably not. I mean, I don't think I'll get him to watch figure skating, but we both like winter sports, so the chances are he'll want to watch the winter sports stuff. And what he doesn't know, but I do, is I am actually taking him back to Italy next month to surprise him for his birthday. So we'll be in at the mountains when that's on. So it will naturally be on TV everywhere.
Yeah, I think one of the big stories of this year's Olympics is going to be the women's bobsled team from, where is it, from Nigeria or somewhere that they don't, it's but there is they're not from one of the traditionally cold weather countries. It's a women's bobsled team that's qualified. And
Well,
they said,
so go on.
and they said, yes, the team does have at least one sprinter on it, making a reference to Cool Running.
Okay. You never know. People can be capable of all sorts, so let's just see what happens. I was actually out in South Korea last March, so I went to visit lots of the venues. So it's going to be really exciting for me watching it, having been to those venues. But we also skied some of the slopes where they're like doing the downhill skiing and stuff. And sadly, I could have actually gone to see the British bobsled team doing practice runs, but unfortunately we had to go to the airport. And it was free. It was like free to see the British bobsled team.
Yeah, so you mentioned being in South Korea, you mentioned traveling to the Middle East. And so I want to ask you something that's also a big excuse for people with traveling, and that is that it's dangerous to travel.
Oh, that is probably one of the worst things anybody can say to me, because it's like, if they're saying that, do they not see the news? Like, Stockholm has had terrorist attacks, London has had 3 terrorist attacks, Berlin has had terrorist attacks, France has had terrorist attacks, there's been terrorist attacks on US soil. So why is it more dangerous to go overseas when those threats exist at home? That's nonsense.
Yeah, it is. It is nonsense, but it is something that a lot of people it'll get in their heads and they'll use it as an excuse. Of course, there are people who are starting to get to that point where they're pretty much staying in their homes and having everything delivered to their house instead of going out to the stores. There are a few of those people now. So it's. But what was your experience in the Middle East or in South Korea as a Westerner? Was there even tension, or I mean, were you ever nervous at all personally being in those countries?
South Korea, definitely not. The South Koreans are really, really friendly. The only thing that I did slightly different in South Korea, I'd planned to go to I think it's called the JSA, so it's like the Joint Security Area, which is the border between North and South Korea. And there's actually a tour that you can do that takes you into North Korea. So I wanted to do that tour, but literally 2 or 3 days before we left, the North Koreans started throwing missiles at the Japanese. So I kind of figured I maybe didn't want to go to the border at that point in time and potentially become a Western hostage for a guy that's perhaps not quite working from the same terms as what we might do. So that's the only thing I changed there. I didn't once feel threatened at all. There's perhaps some of the most welcoming people ever. It really is an amazing country. People should go there. The Middle East, I think it really does depend where you go. So I've definitely had situations where I thought, what's happening here? But I've never been under threat. So we were actually in Tunisia when the terror attacks on the beach happened on the beach, albeit a different resort. So we were maybe 100 miles away. So that was a little bit scary, just because obviously it's not very nice to think of people being massacred on a beach when you're in the country, or indeed anywhere, to be fair. And we were also in Turkey when the coup happened. So we've been quite near to some of the troubles and things that have happened. But some people will shoot me for saying this, but my passion in life is travel. If I die traveling, then I'm going to die happy, because that's what I do. So, I've lived so much in the life that I've already got, and that's a chance that I'm willing to take. Some people may not be willing to take that chance, and that's obviously their choice. But the only thing I would say, if people are holding themselves up in the house in the possibility of what might happen, what kind of life are they having? That's not a life.
So true. So true. It's being scared like that and letting the potential threat keep you from living your life and enjoying your life is not a real way to live. I agree with you there. And once before you mentioned stepchildren. So have you learned anything about traveling with family, in your case a blended family, that might help somebody that's watching to get past those fears?
Oh God, yeah, definitely. So when I first had my stepchildren come into my life, I naively, and anybody who's a parent is going to be shouting at this, saying, how could you be so stupid? So I naively thought they would just want to do the kind of travel that I want to do. They would want to go to some random city that you drive 12 hours to get to and then it's rubbish. Or that they'd want to go to Florida. I assumed my stepkids would want to go to Florida. Don't all kids want to go to Disneyland? But actually, the first trip we took them on was to Disneyland. And the only thing they talk about on that trip is the fact that the flight was rubbish. So I learned really quickly that my idea of a good holiday is very different to theirs. So for the next 7 or 8 years, we went on holiday to Europe and stayed in a caravan for a week, which frankly is my idea of hell, living in a tin box, in a rubbish bed. But the thing that made those holidays really good, and we always talk about them and we've all got lots of joint memories now, which are great to recap, is the fact that they had lots of things to do. They made loads of friends. And because they had lots of things to do, actually it was a really stress-free trip for us. Whereas doing the kind of holiday that I want to do is it's really stressful, because it doesn't entertain them. So we're fortunate, I guess, because a lot of our travel we don't do with my stepchildren because they live with their mom. So we can do our kind of travel when we travel, and we can do their kind of travel when they travel. Yeah. Ironically, I am taking my 2 stepdaughters and my niece to Euro Disney in March, and they're super excited about going to Euro Disney.
Well, the car ride should be shorter than their plane ride was the last time they went to a Disney park.
No, we're flying. We're not driving. We're flying.
Okay. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Now and when you do most of your traveling nowadays, is it mostly by plane, or do you still take the bus or the train or whatever?
It is mostly by plane, but it is because it goes back to what I said before. Obviously, I've got a full-time job and I travel in my spare time. So much as I would like to travel overland, it's not that feasible to do because of the time. So we tend to fly. But we did take some extended time off a couple of years ago, and actually we did a lot of that overland through Asia. So we did overnight trains and overnight buses. But I travelled a lot on buses as a teenager, long distances. And I quite like that stuff because it's sort of exciting and it's a bit different. But if I ask my husband what he thinks of travelling on overnight buses and trains, I usually get a swear word.
Well, I'm generally a patient person who's more who's happier with slower, low stress ways of getting places. So I actually prefer buses and trains to planes myself. But I was just sitting here during our conversation. I'm thinking, you're more of the do 5 days worth of stuff in 3 days kind of person, and I'm more the do 3 days and worth of stuff in 7 days kind of person. And so we are definitely going to have more conversations because we are working towards this Max Around the World Challenge, which, while that is my thing, it's also your thing. So hoping you don't mind me using some of your time to let you talk about that with me. And basically this grew out of the blog post that you wrote, the very wonderful review of my book, The Blind Blogger's New York City Adventures. And you said, why don't you come to Sheffield? And that has led to a bunch of other opportunities. So why don't you explain what we got going on?
So I guess this comes back to the Italy conversation that I said, when these people put me up and I'd never had that opportunity to kind of replay that to somebody else's benefit. But obviously you and I started talking and I sort of jokingly said to you, you should aim bigger, Max. New York's not far enough. Like, why don't you sort of get over to the UK? And surprisingly you said yes, so that was a good start. And then I have quite a creative mind. So then I thought, well, we could turn this into something that could be quite amazing. We could get loads of travel bloggers to host you, potentially send you on this crazy trip around Europe. Well, started with the UK, then it kind of morphed into Europe, and then we've had people get in touch from India and Australia and Canada, but I think that might be a little bit too ambitious at this moment in time. So we're kind of trying to piece together an itinerary so that you get to experience some different cultures and maybe some crazy ass stuff. Like jumping out of a plane.
Yeah, we're still not doing that. That ain't happening. That ain't happening. Yeah, well, all that does is make jumping out of a plane worse. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That just makes that worse, in my opinion.
I actually think that when I did it, I did close my eyes for the first 90 seconds.
But yeah, I think it's an interesting opportunity and challenge. We'll see if we can't pull together a community of bloggers to host me. And I think it proves what you were saying. If you just decide you're going to travel, there are ways you can make it happen without a lot of money or other resources. And in this case, of course, we do have the fellow bloggers as a resource. We can't forget that knowing that a certain amount of them are going to want to help out with this, or at least be there to provide suggestions and encouragement, is a big resource, a big thing to make you feel like that you can do this even if you don't have it all planned out right this minute. So as we talk today, we have my going to Sheffield by way of Manchester in December of this year. But beyond that, we don't really have a lot of definite plans. We're trying to work all of that out. And if watching this, you're one of the people, you're a blogger, even if you're not a travel blogger, but if you're part of my community or Anne's community and you want to support this crazy idea by hosting me, or at least by assisting me while I'm in your city or town, we would love to hear from you. And Anne has a link on our website where you can sign up and give us your information and stay informed about the progress of the planning. And that's over at her website, traveltheglobeforless.com. That's the number 4 instead of FOR. And you can take my word on this if nobody else's. We are not going to be putting you on a mailing list or trying to sell you steak knives or affiliate programs. This is just so we can let you know what we've got planned so far, and hopefully get your input and suggestions to make it better so that this turns out to be a great adventure and hopefully be the subject of my next book or 2 or 3.
Yeah, you see, the thing with this challenge that excites me is it's nothing to do with even the blog, to be honest. You can probably tell travel is a passion for me. It's a gift. And I feel I am incredibly fortunate that I'm in a position that I can travel more, and I am very, very aware of that. But I do make sacrifices to travel. So some people are all about having a big flash car and having a big flash house, and whilst we have nice houses and nice cars, like, I don't buy anything for my house unless it's falling apart. And I don't buy lots of designer clothes or designer bags or designer shoes or designer handbags and all that kind of stuff because I don't care about any of that stuff. The only thing I care about is creating memories. And I think this is kind of what appeals to me with this, because I think I am incredibly fortunate to have had all these amazing memories as a result of traveling. And I want somebody else to be able to experience that and just experience what the world's got to give, because most of us touch such a tiny part of it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it.
So you're my project, Matt.
I see. I'm your project.
You're so lucky.
Yeah. So I am your hobby for the next year. Is that where we're going with this?
Well, I don't know, but when I finished my MBA in August, everybody did say to me, it's going to be 2 months and you're going to be studying again because you're just going to need something to do. But as you and I have talked, you obviously know that I'm raising money for a charity at the moment. So that became my project. And now, like, this is something else that I think, oh, this is really exciting.
I see. So so if it weren't for me, you would be back at university very shortly. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I think inevitably at some point I'm going to start studying again because I'm a bit of a perpetual studier. But at the moment I'm quite enjoying not studying because 3.5 years of constant slog to get my master's and working full time. I'm not in a rush to repeat that at the moment. I'm taking time out.
All righty. Well, I am very happy that we did meet and that we connected and that you were there when I started asking people to review my book, and that the review of the book led to this crazy ass idea. So, and I am looking forward to it. I still have no clue how it's going to look, what's going to happen along the way. But if you're going to be where I'm going to be once I know where that is, be sure and make a way to come say hi. You know, it'd be great to meet some of the people who have been part of this either directly or because they followed one of our blogs. I think that would be really cool to meet some of y'all as I'm traveling around the UK, Europe, and eventually the rest of the world. So we'll see. I want to thank you very much for the book review, the RTW challenge, the website, the blog post, for being my amazing new friend, and for giving me my next challenge, because I really was looking for what my next big thing was going to be and hadn't really found anything that excited me yet either.
Well, there you go. It was obviously fate.
Is there anything you want to say before we finish up here and I tell people to go to my website?
I think really it just comes back to that challenge. You know, the only way it's going to work out is if people help us. And in the past, I've been incredibly bad at asking people for help, but I am asking people for help now. Like, go to my site, go to Max's site, share the post, encourage people that you know to sign up to help us out. Even if you can't get involved yourself, just share the damn post, because somebody you know, we're all connected, somebody you know somewhere can help. And we need you.
Yes, yes. And if you happen to be an employee of a company that might be able to help, and you can put the word in the ear of of decision makers, or tell us who the decision makers are and how we can contact them, that'd be another way that you could help. Because we, at this point, I really don't know where the money, the accommodations, the attractions, the experience, I don't really know where all that's going to come from. So any person that you can help us ask, you know, if you're not comfortable asking them, if you can tell us who to ask, both of us are real good at that. I was actually going to mention before we finished that you said, you know, now you're asking. You're not usually good at doing that, but now you're asking. One of the things I teach people when I do interviews is that when you refuse to ask for help, you rob the other person of the joy that comes from helping you. So I hope we're going to make a lot of people happy by giving them the opportunity to help me get my butt over to England.
And then we're going to turn you into a British person.
Okay. Does it? I'm already halfway there. I drink my tea warm already. So I mean,
we're going to teach you some British sayings. Then we'll give you some Yorkshire.
Give me some Yorkshire. Well, I have friends in the fun fair industry over in the UK, so I'm familiar with quite a few of the words, but I'm sure there's things you're going to teach me I can't use online. So.
Oh yeah, I did come across one yesterday which made me laugh. Can't possibly repeat it in this environment, sadly.
Well, look, I really enjoyed doing this. And let me press stop on the recording, and then we'll continue. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you watching, listening to me, and hearing what Anne has to say about traveling. And don't forget the main point she made today, which is that not having enough money, not having enough time, being afraid for your life, those are all excuses. There's really no reason why you shouldn't be able to travel around your neighborhood, your country, or the world if that's what you really want to do. And I want to appreciate her for reminding you that if I can do this, if she can do this, then what is your excuse? And you can find me at theblindblogger.net. You can buy my book, The Blind Blogger's New York City Adventures, How You Can Make Your Dreams Come True. Until next time, I want to say thank you, God bless you, and take care out there. Too many times we stand aside and let the water slip away till what we put off to tomorrow has finally come today.